The first sign was subtle, almost imperceptible. I'm Barnaby, 46, an IT specialist in Seattle. My wife, Imogen, a vibrant and loving woman, had started keeping her phone closer than usual. We'd been married for 18 years, a seemingly unshakable bond built on trust and mutual respect. We met at a local coffee shop, fell in love over shared dreams, and built a life together. But lately, something felt off. Her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes, and her touches felt distant. She started working late more often, attributing it to a new project at her marketing firm. I didn't question it. Imogen was ambitious and hardworking. I trusted her implicitly. Then came the forgotten anniversary. 18 years. A milestone. I'd booked a table at our favorite restaurant, the one where I'd proposed. I'd even managed to get a bottle of the same champagne we'd celebrated with that night. But Imogen didn't come home. When I called, she sounded flustered, claiming she was stuck in a meeting that had run over. She promised to be home soon, but the reservation time came and went. Finally, around 10 p.m., she arrived, full of apologies and excuses. She'd brought a generic bouquet of flowers, clearly purchased last minute. The hurt was a dull ache in my chest, a feeling I couldn't quite name. I tried to shrug it off, attributing it to the pressures of her job. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The next few weeks were a blur of unanswered questions and growing unease. Imogen became increasingly withdrawn, her eyes darting away whenever I tried to meet her gaze. Her phone was constantly buzzing with notifications, which she'd quickly dismiss with a nervous laugh. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up with a message. Curiosity, or perhaps a premonition, led me to glance at the screen. It was a text from someone named Lysander. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night, my love." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My breath hitched in my throat, my Imogen with someone else. The thought was unbearable. I forced myself to calm down, telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was a work thing, a harmless flirtation, but deep down I knew the truth. The doubt had festered into a gnawing certainty. I needed to know for sure. I decided to confide in my best friend, Benedict. We'd known each other since college, and he'd always been my rock. I met him at our usual pub, the Rusty Mug, and poured out my fears. Benedict listened patiently, his face etched with concern. "Barnaby, this sounds serious," he said after I'd finished. "You need to find out what's going on, but be careful, don't do anything rash." He suggested hiring a private investigator. I initially balked at the idea. It felt like an invasion of privacy, a betrayal of my own trust in Imogen. But Benedict convinced me it was the only way to get the truth without confronting her directly and potentially driving her further away. He recommended a reputable investigator named Portia, someone he'd used in the past for a business matter. I reluctantly agreed, my heart heavy with the weight of my suspicions. Meeting Portia was surreal. She was a no-nonsense woman with a sharp gaze and an air of quiet competence. I explained my situation, handing over a photo of Imogen and providing details about her work schedule and usual routines. Portia assured me she would handle everything discreetly and professionally. "I'll get you the answers you need, Mr. Barnaby," she said, her voice firm. "But be prepared for what you might find." The next few days were agonizing. I lived in a state of constant anxiety, jumping at every phone call and scrutinizing Imogen's every move. I tried to act normal to maintain the facade of a happy marriage, but it was exhausting. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. I lost my appetite and my work suffered. The waiting was a torment. Finally, Portia called. "I have something for you, Mr. Barnaby," she said, her tone somber. "Can you meet me at my office tomorrow morning?" I barely slept that night, my mind consumed by dread. The next morning I arrived at Portia's office, my hands clammy with sweat. She led me into her office and handed me a thick envelope. "This contains all the evidence we've gathered," she said. "Photos, videos, text message logs. I suggest you look at it in private." I took the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest. I thanked Portia and stumbled out of her office, feeling like a condemned man. I drove home in a daze, parked the car, and sat there for a long time staring at the envelope. I didn't want to open it. Part of me wanted to cling to the illusion of my perfect marriage, to deny the truth that was staring me in the face. But I knew I couldn't. I had to know. I took a deep breath, tore open the envelope, and began to look at the evidence. The photos were the worst. Imogen in the arms of another man, Lysander. They were kissing, laughing, holding hands. The photos were taken at various locations: a fancy restaurant, a park, a hotel. Each image was a dagger to my heart, confirming my worst fears. The videos were even more damning. They showed Imogen and Lysander entering the hotel room, their faces flushed with excitement. I couldn't bring myself to watch them all the way through. The text message logs were the final nail in the coffin. They were filled with intimate messages, declarations of love, and explicit details of their affair. Imogen had been lying to me for months, betraying my trust in the most brutal way imaginable. The pain was overwhelming, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, winded and unable to breathe. Tears streamed down my face as I stared at the evidence of my shattered marriage. How could she do this to me? How could she betray our vows, our love, our life together? I spent the rest of the day in a state of shock, wandering around the house like a ghost. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. The betrayal was all-consuming, poisoning my mind and soul. I replayed our entire relationship in my head, searching for clues, for signs I'd missed. Had I been blind? Had I been too trusting? Had I somehow driven her into the arms of another man? I couldn't find any answers, only more questions. As the day wore on, my grief began to morph into anger, a cold, burning rage that simmered beneath the surface. I wanted to confront Imogen, to scream at her, to demand an explanation. But I knew that wouldn't accomplish anything. She would lie, deny, or try to manipulate me. I needed to stay calm, to think clearly, to plan my next move. When Imogen finally came home that evening, she seemed surprised to see me. "Barnaby, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice casual. "I thought you had a late meeting." I stared at her, my eyes filled with a mixture of pain and anger. "I know," I said, my voice flat. "I know about Lysander." Her face paled. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her eyes darting around the room. "Don't play dumb, Imogen," I said, my voice rising. "I have the photos, the videos, the text messages. I know everything." She burst into tears. "Barnaby, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "A mistake?" I scoffed. "You've been having an affair for months and you call it a mistake. You've lied to me, betrayed me, and destroyed our marriage." I know," she cried. "I was selfish. I was bored. I don't know what came over me." "Bored," I repeated, my voice trembling with rage. "After 18 years you were bored. Is that all our love meant to you? A source of entertainment?" She didn't answer, her head bowed in shame. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice firm. "I want you out of my house, out of my life." "Barnaby, please," she begged. "Don't do this. I can change. I can make it up to you." "It's too late, Imogen," I said. "You've broken my heart beyond repair. There's nothing left to salvage." I watched as she packed her bags, her face streaked with tears. I felt nothing but contempt for her. As she walked out the door, she turned back and said, "I'll regret this for the rest of my life, Barnaby." "So will I, Imogen," I replied. "So will I." The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. I filed for divorce, and Imogen didn't contest it. She moved in with Lysander, but I heard through mutual friends that their relationship was already strained. The guilt and shame of her betrayal had cast a shadow over their affair, and they were constantly arguing. I tried to focus on rebuilding my life, but it was difficult. The pain of the betrayal was a constant companion, a dull ache that never seemed to go away. I threw myself into my work, spending long hours at the office to distract myself from my grief. I also started seeing a therapist who helped me process my emotions and develop coping mechanisms. Slowly, gradually, I began to heal. One day I received a phone call from Benedict. "Barnaby, you won't believe what I just heard," he said, his voice filled with glee. "Lysander's wife found out about the affair and she's divorcing him. She's also taking him for everything he's worth. He's lost his house, his car, his business. He's completely ruined." A wave of satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't revenge, but it was justice. Imogen and Lysander had caused me immense pain, and now they were paying the price for their actions. Karma, it seemed, had a way of balancing the scales. I didn't revel in their misfortune, but I couldn't deny the sense of relief it brought me. It was a sign that I was finally moving on, that I was no longer defined by their betrayal. I eventually started dating again, cautiously and tentatively. I met a wonderful woman named Genevieve, a kind and compassionate artist who understood my pain and supported my healing. We took things slow, building a relationship based on trust and mutual respect. With Genevieve, I found love again, a love that was stronger and more resilient than anything I had experienced before. Imogen's betrayal had left scars, but it had also made me wiser and more appreciative of the true meaning of love. I learned that betrayal can break you, but it can also make you stronger. It can teach you valuable lessons about yourself, about others, and about the importance of forgiveness. I never fully forgave Imogen, but I learned to let go of the anger and resentment that had consumed me for so long. I realized that holding onto those negative emotions was only hurting myself. Years later, I received a letter from Imogen. She was living in a small town, working as a waitress. Lysander had left her, and she was struggling to make ends meet. She apologized for her actions, acknowledging the pain she had caused me and expressing her remorse. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but she hoped that one day I would be able to find peace. I read the letter with a mixture of emotions, sadness, pity, and a faint flicker of compassion. I didn't respond, but I wished her well in my heart. I had moved on with my life, found happiness again, and learned to live with the scars of the past. Imogen's betrayal would always be a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I was Barnaby, a survivor, a lover, a man who had learned to trust again, even after the most devastating betrayal. Life had taught me that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a brighter future. You just have to be willing to embrace it.